Welcome to another video by Pharos Technology. Today we want to talk about automating Microsoft Access functions with macros. This is kind of the beginning primer, but let's get started. And in order to create a macro, you hit the Create ribbon, and then over on the right-hand side, you see the macro and code section, and click on macros. Now, in order to show all actions on the list, you have to click this button up here. The more intrusive macros that you can run won't appear until you use that one, such as ones I'll show you a little bit later. So the first thing you have is you have the action catalog on the right, and you have the macro design view area on the left-hand side. Now, we're going to show you the list as it exists without showing all the actions, like set warning and echo that I'll show you a bit later will not be on this list because they can do more damage. You need to be cautious when you use them and use them correctly. But first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a message box. We're going to say hello. So we're going to type in hello here. We're going to leave it as a beep so that when the dialog box comes up, it beeps at you. We're going to tell it that the type of dialog box is going to just be an informational box. Although we could have more, we could have critical, we could have a warning, question mark, warning, exclamation point, but we'll leave it at information for now. The title of it is going to be using variables. Here we go. And now we run it and we save it. And there's our dialog box, our message box. It's an information box. The circle with the I lets you know that it's an information only box. It says hello. The title is using variables. So we'll click OK and let that one go. Now let's modify this one, pretty it up a little bit and add to it. Let's add a temporary variable first, okay? So we'll set a temporary variable here. When we click out of that, we'll give the name as my name, which we're going to ask the user's name at the beginning of the dialog box. So we'll set that variable at my name. And then the expression is going to be that we're going to pop up a dialog box in order to put the information there. Other expressions might be you'll point to a form to get a value. Here we're just going to make it an input box. Then at the end we have to deconstruct that variable like you do in a lot of other VBA and C++ and so forth. We're just going to deconstruct that variable. Now we could remove all temp variables, or we could just remove a specific temp variable, and that command is just remove temp variables. There we go. And so if we do that, we can specifically name the one that we want to deconstruct or get rid of here. Now, if you have a lot of temporary variables that you've set in your macro, you can just use all and save yourself the time. So now we want to do a little bit more with the message here. We want to capture a little bit more information. In other words, we want to say hello and throw that name in there from the temp variable. So we'll paste in the appropriate code there. So we'll say hello, and then we'll point to temp variables, bang, my name, ampersand, period. So it'll say hello, my name, and then the period. Okay? So let's see what happens when we run this. You have to save it before you run it. That'll always come up. And here's enter your name. I'll go ahead and enter my nickname, Rick. And now it says hello, Rick, and it works just perfect. Now let's take it a little bit further and let's go to our next example. And we're going to go ahead and create a form here. What I want to do now is show you how you can attach a command or attach a macro to a button. We'll also attach macros to events later on. We'll show you a lot of examples of those going in later videos. But here we're going to click miscellaneous, and then we'll run the macro. Now here it'll let us choose which macro, and right at the top it just says macro 1, which was the macro we named it. And we're going to go ahead and give it a name, hello world. And we'll finish that up. We've got a nice nifty little button there. We'll put it in form view, and we'll go ahead and see if it works. We'll click, and we get enter your name, that dialog box again. And Rick, so we can see the macro is already running, right? and we click OK, and there we go. Now the macro isn't just a macro anymore. It's a macro that is embellishing a button. Now I'm going to show you a macro and what the power of a macro can do. This particular macro, notice we have set warnings on here, and set warnings came off of our show all actions portion of our menu. Now set warnings always comes in pairs. Well, the first thing we'll do is we'll set warnings until turn it off. Now, if we forget to turn it back on, turn those warnings back on, the entire database won't give us any warnings at all. Every time you run an action, it won't say, do you really want to do this? Which might be kind of nice at times, but not very practical. Now, the same thing is true with our display hourglass. So while this thing is running, we want the cursor to change to an hourglass. So we'll turn it off down here. We turned it on up there. Okay, so both of those come in pairs. We will turn on an echo here. And an echo allows us to throw a message in the status bar. And that status bar is in the lower right-hand corner. We'll turn echo off, which means it'll not show what the macro is doing along the way. So it'll hide that so the user just sees a static screen. Now, if we don't eventually turn echo back on, the user will think that the application is locked up because they won't see anything going on the screen. They won't be able to open anything. Everything they click on will seem like it's just dead. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to delete contacts, and we're going to make an archive of the current context in this. So we've made 4 different queries here, and those 4 different queries will be able to be run one after another, and we'll throw in an echo in there to give status bar notifications as to what's happening next as we progress. And there's our next query: delete products, delete contacts. We're going to put an echo there that says now we're going to be appending data versus deleting data in our first status bar message. And then we're going to open the next query, which is going to append the contacts to that table we purged, and then append the products to the table we purged up above. We'll put in another echo that it turns back on, and then with the echo turned back on, we'll set warnings back on. We'll set the display pointer back to a normal pointer. Well, let's look at the message box here. And the message box we're going to have come up just says that we've archived the data. We're going to leave the beep on. It's an information box. And the title bar, we're going to put finished archiving for the title bar. Okay. With all that reviewed, I think we're ready to test it. Let's run here. And we have to save it, of course. It'll always ask you to save before you run it. Contacts and products have been archived. Now, that one went so fast that we would not be able to see any messages in that status bar. In other words, that echo text that we're putting in the status bar really wouldn't have a chance to appear. But in any case, echo is really good when you have very long-running processes. So if you gained some information on this and feel it useful, hit that like button. Hope to see you again in another video. Thanks.